This is the FlyPro XJaguar. It is a 5-inch racing quad that is ready to assemble. Disclaimer for this entire video. I have no idea how to say the word Jaguar. It just kind of is confusing to me. So I'm gonna stick with Jaguar, kind of in the British form. I kind of like the way that Jeremy Clarkson says it. So I'm gonna stick with that. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. If I'm right, awesome. So we're looking at this quad from the perspective of a ready to build, ready to assemble kit that is going to be good for a newcomer. The components that come on the quad are themselves actually pretty good. The motors we've done a previous review on, which I think were just rebranded as the GS 2205-2300 kV motors from Ready to Fly quads, and those stand up. They're really smooth. They don't have the highest top end power, but you're not going to notice that if you're someone that's jumping in in the early stages of your quad building career. In addition, the ESCs are little B 20 amp Pros, which have an F390 chip and are capable of running multi-shot. Because they can run multi-shot, you have that faster communication speed between the ESCs and the flight controller, and as a result you have a better overall flight performance in the end. The flight controller itself is an SPF Racing F3 clone that is built into their custom stack, and it does just fine. I have yet to really come across a flight controller that just doesn't fly well, especially once we've gotten into the F3 world. So I'm happy with how it flies, especially with Betaflight 3.0.1 at the time of this article, and the combination of multi-shot, which makes the flight performance that much better. Next, the video transmitter is a OSD video transmitter all-in-one that stacks with the flight controller and ESCs. As a result, the only soldering that you need to do to assemble this entire build is to put the motors onto the ESC. Now, I like soldering, I like being part of that process, but not everybody does. And so it's actually really easy to, if you, for example, break a motor, just swap that on and none of the other electronics are going to need to change, assuming you don't have massive critical failure. The camera is a Runcam Swift. I believe it comes with a 2.8mm lens. For the purposes of this, because I can't fly on that small of a field of view, I've put a 1.8 IR blocking lens from Banggood in it. So with an overview of all of the components, I wanted to kind of quickly jump into the things that I did like about this and some of the things that I did not like about it. First of all, as was previously mentioned, I really like the electronics that are in it. They're solid pieces for somebody that's just beginning to fly or is maybe on their second build, maybe had a failure on the first one and just kind of wanted to get something that was out of the box. This is good stuff. You will not be disappointed with what all of these electronics can do for someone that is not looking for the ultimate cutting bleeding edge of the technology available. Another thing that I liked about this build was that the all-in-one solution that they provide works. I've had experiences with AIO boards and products and stacks and stuff that have not worked very well in the past, and this one just does. It's got that 4-in-1 ESC, the flight controller, the VTX, the OSD. It's all in one tiny little stack that performs, and I'm pretty thrilled with that actually. It kind of makes me wonder what else could be possible with builds in the future. A simple thing that I liked about it was that on the back there is an LED strip that is addressable, meaning you can have it hook up to the flight controller and respond to certain inputs. And that board itself actually had on it a buzzer. Personally, I don't use buzzers because it's just an extra step and an extra point of failure that I have to go and maintain. But the fact that it was included into one quick thing made it really nice and something that I actually use now. The build itself is actually fairly light. Looking at it, I would have assumed that it was going to be upwards of 340, 350 grams, but it turns out it's actually about 310 all up, which is competitive. I mean, it's not the lightest build in the world, but it's certainly not the heaviest. So when you kind of are comparing things, you know, this, because of the lightweight and the decent performance of the motors, it actually flies very, very well. The build becomes very clean because of the all-in-one solution, because of the way that the wires are routed. There are no wires hanging anywhere. It looks very clean. It looks very good. It's going to keep motor wires or antenna wires or whatever from getting into the props and, you know, ruining your day. And I'm kind of an advocate of clean builds in the sense that if they are clean, they're going to be better protected against stupid things that happen when you're in the field. Now that we've covered the good things, I'm going to take a step back and look at the things that I didn't like all that well. First of all, looking at this from the perspective of a nearly ready to fly or ready to build kind of kit that's aimed at the newcomer, I was expecting it to be a very easy build. It kind of wasn't. It was very confusing. The instructions weren't super useful. There are video resources online, which I didn't know at the time, but the fact that it kind of required that was a little bit kind of confusing to me. You had to have certain motors in certain places, and you had to have certain wires and certain screws in the right places, and it all just kind of, I made it work. I actually think I have one of the arms backwards because I didn't realize that I needed to do it a particular way, and I just didn't go back to change it because it was a lot of work. So while it was something that it was aimed at being easy to build, I don't think that it quite hit the mark on that. Personally, I am no longer a fan of the pod quad style. This is a true X frame that has the camera and equipment all in the same spot, and the camera kind of sticks up above on top of the flight controllers. I personally don't think that the flight performance for something like that is quite as good as other methods of camera mounting, but you know, that is a personal preference of mine, so you can take that or leave it as it is. The quad comes with a 2.8 millimeter lens. I think the industry as a whole has moved to wider angle field of view lenses, and the lens that comes with this 2.8 has a very low field of view, and actually I think makes it harder for someone to learn to fly. I think that wider angles give you more information and give you a better sense of relative to your environment. Well, I think the manufacturers were going for extra strength with the aluminum side plates that make up the top section of the quad, but aluminum is pretty bendy and kind of cheesy, and it doesn't really hold its shape super well. And as a result, I can imagine that after a few crashes, the pretty looking XJaguar logo on the side is going to start to look a little bit like monstrosity. It's not going to hold its shape, and I'm worried about the long-term durability of this quad. At this point, I've probably put about 15 batteries through it, and it's still in pretty good condition. But that being said, I don't know if it's going to last through, you know, an entire day of racing, for example. You need to be able to count on your build to stay durable and stay put together, but I'm not sure if it's going to live up to that expectation. Personally, I think that this quad is somewhat difficult to maintain. For me, for my purposes, I'm very interested in racing. And in racing, you need to be able to make fixes quickly to your machines. Now, when I try to work with this, the top plate is held on by a nut and a screw at the bottom of the quad. Now, to put the top plate back on, you have to hold the nut in a very particular place while you screw in the screw from the other side, and it's hard. It is very hard to do, and it makes it really, really frustrating when you have to go in and work on something on the inside of the pod. While we're talking about the pod, the two side plates they overlap with the USB port, and as a result, when you're trying to put the top plate on, it can catch the USB port. And at this point on my model, I am very, very close to actually tearing that whole USB port off, just because of how tricky it is to get the top plate on and off. I just wanted to quick share that during the filming of the B-roll for this machine, the USB port did fall all the way off. So it's still probably accessible via FTDI, but that's pretty obnoxious. In summary, I think that I would, among a number of different items on the market, recommend this as something for someone to get in when they're early in their process. I don't think I would recommend it as a first build, because I want people to have the experience of learning how each of the different components interact. This kind of obfuscates that a little bit and makes it it takes away from what is the learning experience. And the more you know about your machines, the better chance you're going to have at being able to fix them and maintain them and not get frustrated when something doesn't quite work right. So would I say this should be a first build? No. Should I say it would be a good second build? Yeah, I think it actually would. It's light, it's got good components, it's pretty quick, I've enjoyed flying it, and what comes there is, you know, it's a solid machine. Is it the best one on the market? No, not by any means, but for the price point of $320, yeah, that's hard to beat. All you have to do is put in a receiver and you're ready to go. So the XJaguar 5-inch X-Quad racing machine is pretty good in my books. I like it. I enjoy flying it. I think that the electronics in it are solid. And if you're looking for a good second build, something that you can just kind of rely on, something that you always have on your backpack ready to just drop on the field and go, I don't have any complaints about it. I think it would be good for that. Would I recommend it as a first thing? No. Just because of some of the nuances of this particular build might turn you off to the industry as a whole. So that's the XJaguar. Take it as you will and stay flying.